So resilience.
Resilience meant
forward ever, backwards never.
You have to get up.
It's being able to...
doesn't resilience lead to burnout?
persistence.
But as long as you stick to it.
So that for me is what resilient community is all about.
When I think of resilience,
the old definition of resilience.
I would just call it the ability to...
Very tough game. And
so resilience for me means...
Resilience for me...
not giving up.
I think it's perseverance.
I think it's about giving yourself the grace to make mistakes and fail.
The four pathway is often referred to as the artist. Isn't that amazing? Or the romantic. The other thing that I love to say, your business partners, is that one of the, and not that, please know that it's not about any personality is better with any other one. Absolutely not. Two good people with good hearts are together. But I so frequently see the 4 and 7 pattern, the 4 and 7 together. And it's a great combination in business or romantic relationships, any combination is. But what you have is the 7 usually is the point of lightness and fun and visionary and optimistic, and the 4 is the depth. Let's make this deeper. And so it's a lovely synergy.
Yeah, I think that we complement each other extremely well as business partners. Yeah, from day one, we recognize that we were very well matched. Best relationship I've ever been in.
That's great. And that's, of course, not to say, of course, Vicky, you can do depth, and of course, Laura, you can do fun and enjoyment. But that's it. It's knowing the developmental pathway and then becoming more of who you actually already are. So we've got all 9 in us. We're just overly doing one pathway. When we identify it, we become more flexible, and so the 7 can learn to sit a bit more in suffering maybe, which is hard because pain is not fun. And the 4 can learn sometimes to be light, light and see so much meaning in mundane moments. So it's a growth path.
Mm-hmm. Tracy, welcome to Resilient Entrepreneurs.
Thanks so much. It's such a delight to be here.
Oh, look, this is the podcast where we get to talk about the ups and downs of being in business and discovering the cool things that other business owners do to get through or around or up and over, any of the hurdles and challenges that we overcome in business. So it's a real treat to have you on the episode, because I know you're going to have so much good advice.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the more episodes we record, the more we realize that everyone has some adversity in life.
Yes.
It might be trauma, it might be grief. So it's just sometimes that crazy stuff that happens in business that feels really challenging at the time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I guess the key is just how to overcome it, how to find the gift in the pain and use it to our benefit so that we can be better than we already are. So I'm really looking to just dive into that today. So just for background, Tracy, you're a relationship and personality psychologist. Yeah?
Yes.
And you teach and use Enneagram as a tool to help people through difficult situations. Tell us, how did you get into that? And maybe more importantly, why?
Yeah, sure. My pleasure. So I did psychology later in life in my 30s and started off in child protection and a range of jobs. And then about 18 years ago, I came across the Enneagram and found it was the most profound, incisive tool to help people understand their inner worlds. So it was really useful for me to understand my inner world and why I had the responses in my family of origin that I did, why my mum and dad were as they were, why my future husband, the differences between us. And it was so profoundly useful. I got really involved in it and trained extensively in the Enneagram here in Australia and overseas in America, presented at the conference, started a PhD around that. And then put that on hold for a lot of good reasons, and then just had a bit of a dip, and then really had to think about what do I want to do. And I'd been in private practice for about 15 years and using the Enneagram, and I thought I want to found my own business where it's just using the Enneagram but developed into a really comprehensive method that helps future-proof relationships. And so I'm really passionate about that, and I think the method is working. And so I founded the Insight Agency about 4 years ago, and have been developing and testing this method called Couple DNA Method, or it could be Relationship DNA Method, mother and daughter, or you and anybody else. But to help two people really deeply understand themselves and the other person, because we misjudge and we misunderstand. And many separations are not irreconcilable differences, they're misunderstood differences. And I want to stop those misunderstandings. Yeah.
I'm so intrigued already. I'm one of those type of people. I love to do the tests, personality tests. I love anything to dig deeper into who I am. And I'm always been fascinated about that. But tell us a little bit more about what Enneagram is. If for somebody who's never heard of it before, what is that?
Yes, absolutely. If you look it up, it looks like it's a personality tool, but it's so much more than that. It's really a psychological and spiritual tool for personal transformation. And I don't use that word transformation lightly. I mean, it really, after 20 years of using it, it really does transform people's view of themselves and others in such a helpful way. But it describes 9 life strategies, or you could call them personality types. I refer to them, as Daniel Siegel does, who's a neuropsychiatrist, as personality developmental pathways. So each of us across the world, we've done millions, thousands, probably millions of interviews with people all around the world. And these 9 personality developmental pathways, or PDPs, exist universally. So we fall into one of these pathways, and it describes our inner world. If all of us in the world knew what our personalities were, we would realize that we're more similar across the world. Somebody that has the 2 personality developmental pathway in China is so similar to somebody in Syria, or somebody in Japan, or somebody here. It's a beautiful tool for recognizing the sameness under the different strategies that we use to feel okay in the world. So 9 different ways to feel safe and okay and loved in the world, really. But they're often taught as personality types, but it is more than that. And it's not about categorizing and putting people in a box. It's saying, wow, do you realize there's actually a developmental pathway that drives you, that's unconscious, that you probably didn't know, most people don't know. And once you know it, it's so revealing and your life makes sense. And it's such a human need for our lives to make sense. And when that makes sense, we can just, things in us like the shaken globe just can settle a little bit. And then, of course, there's the invitation for growth. So it's not just saying, so this is your developmental pathway, this is it. It explains from temperament right through to adulthood why you have the developmental pathway you do. Lots of science behind this now, and I care deeply about that too. And a growth path of, these are the things that, this is your superpower and this is your gift, and we all have one or a few of those. And also, this is the challenge, and this is the area to work on. And for all of us, it's about presence, really. Can we all be more present, more conscious?
Yeah, I could see that it could be really useful for people who are searching for a purpose, searching for an understanding of their business, why, what they're going to do within their business. Because when you lead, we know that when you lead your business with purpose,
yes,
it tends to be more impactful and more successful over the long haul. So is it also a way that people can, when they learn this about themselves, is it useful in how they then move on to create their purpose and to move forward in that? Is it useful?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it describes, in the most spiritual way, it actually describes the barriers to love and to God, whatever people think of as God. But it actually is the things that get in the way of us being our best selves. So each of the personalities have core beliefs around, I have to be like this in the world to be okay. And they're driven by that. And so the ego, so it's 9 ego states, are constantly telling us, don't be like that, be like that, don't say that. It just worries and constantly giving us messages of how to be. And often the messages are really unhelpful. They're not self-compassionate, they're not compassionate, and they get us into trouble. They're automatic sort of behavioral strategies that get us into trouble. So when we know our primary ego's way, and we can take the best of that and say, yes, this is really important to me, and these are the areas I have to work on, it just really helps you to have clarity, I think, around purpose. Yes, around purpose. So maybe a good example is, it's used extensively now in the Enneagram Prison Project, which I'm on their advisory board and I care deeply about. So it's used in some of the most hardened prisons in America, where very experienced Enneagram teachers go in and run a program. And those that are incarcerated that come out, the recidivism rates drop from something like 75% to 5%. Because they've discovered why they did what they did and put that all together in a way that they can see the best in themselves yet again. They understand why they did what they did, and they could find a new purpose. And then they're coming out now and teaching the Enneagram and going back into prisons And of course, the Enneagram's used in leadership extensively.
That's fascinating. And what incredible results. I mean, for
Yes.
those percentages to
Yes.
reduce recidivism. And wow,
Yes.
that's really staggering, Tracy. There's the whole nurture and nature conversation that happens. Yeah. And I can't help but wonder how much of the nurture factors into this. How can there only be 9 types? And we all grow up through such different backgrounds. And I guess, there's probably multiple questions in this, but a lot of the time we'll say, well, I'm like this because that happened to me as a child.
Yes.
And then we get to choose, well, do we want that to be our future as well as adults, or are we willing to work with it and not let it hinder us for the rest of our life? That's one way of kind of addressing psychology and issues, but this sounds quite deeper.
It is, Vicky. And there's a brain study group in America that's led by some of the world's best Enneagram teachers and some scientists, and Daniel Siegel, who's a neuropsychiatrist and is all about attachment and how we grow up and how personality is formed to some degree. And this group, like myself, are looking at how do we explain temperament, like how when we're born, and temperament through to personality. Where does personality come from? And so I think those of us in the Enneagram world would all agree that it's not like we're born with the Enneagram pathway, but we're certainly born with a temperament. And so a lot of that temperament that we're born with has to do with whether we're more extroverted or introverted, whether we're more forward moving or moving away, whether we're more high energy or low energy. And also, importantly, we have 3 centers of intelligence, so head, heart, and gut, ways of taking information in from the world. And it seems to be that even little ones, the studies that have been done on 1 and 2-year-olds, we can see that we seem to very quickly lead with one over the other. So you put that bit of information together, and then that starts to lead you on a trajectory or personality developmental pathway. So if you are a little one that's born leading with emotional intelligence and is extroverted and is forward moving and has high energy, they're likely to form the developmental pathway that's about connection is my core motivation, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep relationships and be helpful, giving and serving. And so to do that, I need to push my own needs down and just focus on yours, which is beautiful. And it's all about love, but they leave themselves out.
You've just described my daughter to a T. Like everyone, I was like, yep, tick, tick, tick. She's only 9. She's only 9. So, she doesn't have relationships like that yet, but it'd be interesting to keep that in mind. Make sure.
And Laura, my girl has as well. We've known she has the 2 patterns since she was 2. And we've watched that develop and how that works. And I've had the privilege now of doing this for 20 years, of watching children grow up and watching the difference in their behaviors and what they care about and how they respond to things. And incredible. I mean, you often don't, it's harder to work out the personality until they're maybe in their early teens, but still sometimes you can see it when they're little. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess there's positive and negative side effects of each of those ego lines. So the positive is that you're a giver and you're caring, and you may even become a carer or a nurse, for instance. But then I guess there's a downside of never putting yourself first, and maybe even becoming codependent because you need other people to make you feel, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because the core beliefs are so strong and they're formed early, and somewhere in the conditioning, which is what you were getting at in terms of nurture, somewhere in the conditioning that somehow gets cemented. And so depending on, say, if it is that little girl with the 2 developmental pathway, if she's really rewarded for that helpfulness, then that conditioning will impact on the 2 pathway. It doesn't create it, but it impacts on it. If all of her helpfulness doesn't work and her life strategies, the best of what she knows to do, are not appreciated over time, you're going to see some really significant mental health problems. So it's really predictive as well. Also
important for parents then to understand how to react to certain situations.
Yes. And if they've got a little child that's has the 2 pathway and then the 8 pathway, which is all about it's my way or the highway, and they might not understand each other, and they might not understand those 2 children. And so when you look through the lens of this, it's incredibly helpful. So at some point, I really want to do the couple work, but I will take it into later high schools and then eventually to prep, because I think there's some work we need to do here in terms of people understanding just differences in a beautiful, simple way to honor them. Difference is beautiful. Difference is the attraction that needs to be honored.
Yeah,
Incredible.
and it's funny, like you talk about in the schools where teens, their driver is to be in the community of their friend group, right? And it's really important that everybody likes me and we're all the same, and they kind of amalgamate into the same kind of person with the same kind of clothes and backpacks and hairstyles, and you know what I mean, to be very inclusive in that. But yet, if teenagers can get the message that they're all unique and their way is just their way, and this is their superpower within that they can grow up to, I think that's powerful change that could happen in the most sort of crucial time in life, where they're just starting to learn who they are and what they want to do with the rest of their life. So,
Absolutely. And I work with a lot of couples, and often they'll say, this is so great, I want to bring my teenagers. And so then I see the not that I normally work with teenagers anymore, and I see the teenagers and we work out their pattern. There's one lovely young boy that I work with that I thought initially he might have had the 6 pathway, which is sort of looking for where things can go wrong in life and overly predicting a threat. And it turned out he didn't. He had the 4 pathway, which is all about authenticity and wanting to be unique and lots of intelligence behind that. And if I'm different in some way, then people want to connect with me because I'm not just like everybody else. And so for him as a 16-year-old boy to learn he had the 4 pathway meant that because part of the 4 ego will say, stand back, just wait for people to come to you. And if people come to you, then that proves that, that they want to connect with you. And so, of course, then what happens is that the person with the 4 pathway looks like they're aloof and they look like they're not wanting to connect. And he hadn't realized, he said immediately, I do that all the time. So inviting him to step forward, even though it was scary and it's uncomfortable and it feels counterintuitive, can he step forward? And he's been doing lots more of that and making lots more friends and, again, finding his purpose. He's doing music because he's all about depth. It's just gorgeous. Yeah, it's so lovely. Yeah. And using a superpower, which is give him anything and he'll find the depth in it. And he leads with his heart. So 3 of the personalities lead with their head, 3 lead with their heart, and 3 lead sort of with gut intelligence. But a different primary motivation for each center.
How would you apply this to business? I mean, our audience is a lot of solopreneurs, people who are working on their own, but still obviously working in the community with clients and other partners and vendors. So how, I can only imagine that this helps to build resilience in some way.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting because maybe to answer the question, the invitation maybe to talk about resilience, and then maybe answer the question about using it in organizations, if that's all right, Vicky, because it's used in organizations all over the world, and I've used it a bit in organizations here. My great passion is personal relationships. But I think in terms of resilience, I think it's about the capacity to, a lot of everything comes for me back to being able to be present, but to be able to be self-aware and be self-compassionate and to be able to self-regulate. I think those 3 things are really powerful. And I think if we can do that, then we'll be resilient. And I don't know if you've heard of wonderful Michael Singer, who's a spiritual teacher. And I'm just listening to his podcast all the time. He's fabulous. And he says, and it's about sort of getting the ego out of the way, or as I would talk about it. And he says that really spirituality is about, can you handle it? And for me, that's what resilience is. Can you handle it? There's a lot of traffic and you're running late. Can you handle it? Can you handle it? Can you be okay? And I think if we have self-awareness and we know why the ego is driving us, and we can have a little chat to it and say, thank you very much, but that's not very helpful right now. And you can bring self-compassion in and you can regulate your nervous system. For me, that's resilient. And so then maybe bringing that into organizations, I think it's still about, can we be all more self-aware? Because there's so much reactivity in the world, which distresses me to see that. So much automatic reactivity and people struggling to even understand what's going on in them, let alone to understand it, let alone to then make sense of it and then be able to regulate it. And so I think for people in organizations for business owners to be able to do that for themselves is profoundly important. And then to be able to help their clients do that, or leaders if they're executive coaches, but for the leaders to do that, and then be mentors to other people in that, because we co-regulate each other. Our nervous systems, if we can co-regulate each other, that'd be a really great world rather than setting each other off. That's probably a bit of a long answer, really, but
no, but it's understanding, right? It's understanding each other a little bit better. And often most arguments, issues arise because of misunderstanding.
Yes, absolutely. And I've been working with couples married 10, 20, 30 years, and they come in, and then once they work out their 2 developmental pathways, and I draw it all up on the board, and it all makes sense. And we look at their primary needs and their core wounds and vulnerabilities, and we piece all that together with their pathways. They'll say, oh my God. And I'll be able to help them learn that no wonder your wife was doing this, and no wonder the other person was doing that. So it brings in a no wonder rather than a blame, in a way that most couples will say to me, we've been misunderstanding for a decade. Why didn't we know this when we were younger? And it's quite heartbreaking. And so the work I'm doing is to try and bring it pre-marriage, bring it earlier in, because that's what everybody's asking for. But people, when they're in love and in those early days, they don't realize that they maybe need it, and they don't want it. They just think this is the way it's going to be. But stresses happen, and maybe children come along, and that this self-awareness is utterly important.
It sounds like when you get a car license, you have to do the test or you get your license. Can we not make this the test before you get your marriage license? Like, you got to do this first so you understand each other, and then you can get married. Then we're going to,
It's just good. It's just sensible. And it's good psychology. And we have no education in relationship. None in, maybe not none, but little in schools. And I really think it can start with little preppies, just talking about feelings and needs and the other person's needs and how you feel feelings and needs in your body, and really starting to bring that into the curriculum, because really all conflict is to do with poorly expressed needs. It's the strategies that we're using to meet our needs, and the strategies of one person clashes with the other person's needs. And we can cut through that really quickly when we know the personality developmental pathways of 2 people, and we know their primary needs. Just really can, and their core wounds. We all have wounds. And to know that, it's so predictive. Can predict where the rubs will be and prevent them. Or at least when the rubs come up, we can be healing agents for one another, and rather than step on each other's wounds, but actually go, oh, I get why that's so important to you, and I know what you need. We've talked about this, and I know that it's not a hug you need right now. It's verbal reassurance, or it's space, or but you've predicted and you know what each other needs, and you're healing each other.
Yeah, that's profound. That is so... Yeah. And it makes not a good argument for the more need of more mental health, just general in society. Yeah. We go to see our doctor whenever we have anything that goes wrong, but how many of us get to go and see a therapist when there's a trauma that needs to be healed? And more of this is just needed generally. I'm a big, strong believer in it, and hope to see much more of it in the future, so that we can start healing these things and understanding each other, and just understanding ourselves. I'm having this problem. I'm expressing it this way because of this deep wound that I haven't dealt with. Deal with the wound can kind of resolve the problem. Yeah, it is, but it's just that lack of understanding. Ooh, so how are we going to get more of this out there?
Well, I'm really passionate about it. I was saying to Vicky, because I'm stuck in the 1970s, and all my business is word of mouth. But I'm about to train therapists in the Enneagram, because I did the PhD because I wanted to show its clinical efficacy, and put that on hold for a number of reasons. But a lot of psychologists are coming to me, how do I train in this? So it's such a delight, because I think it's the missing piece in relationship work. And sometimes, possibly in some therapeutic work, because when therapists understand themselves deeply, it helps even more so to understand where there might be transference. It brings even more compassion in. It brings understanding more quickly. Like, I can have somebody come into the room, and because I've done about 2,500 personality interviews, I quickly get at people's energy. So I'll often just know their personality just by kind of looking at them, and their energy, go by energy and eye contact and language and a whole range of things that gets codified. but yeah, so it's mostly looking for their superpower. I think my thing is I can see value in people. I love that. That's my passion. And I want people to see their own value, and I want their partners to see their value and see the best in them.
I think you rise to that, don't you? When someone does see your value, I think you rise to that as well, because you want to see yourself, in somebody else's eyes. I think that's really cool.
So should we do it, Laura? Should we put Tracy in the hot seat and have her call our number?
I want to know. Like, I want to know
you do.
So bad.
I can see it. What do you think, Tracy? Are you up for it?
I can ask a couple of questions, and so
sure. We're an open book. And that's telling in itself. That's good. Everything's telling. And I mean that with the deepest respect. Like, I never want to sound like it's stereotyping, because it's not, and that would be an unethical use of it. There would be a circus act.
Yes, and please don't. Yeah, absolutely. For everybody listening, it's not about, you're a 2, you're a 7. It's please, can we do this with, no wonder that was important to you. I get it. I know what you said might have been upsetting, but wow, I get it. And so the way that people often find out their personality is through an online test. And some of those are pretty good, like Russ Hudson's and Jerry Wagner's and Beatrice Chestnut. But all of the online tests, and these wonderful authors and teachers I know would say, you're still blind to your own stuff. And so you can answer it, but there's blind spots. So the self-report surveys are really limited. And so we've been teaching for probably the last 40 years, started from America, but as gold standard as you can get in something like this, but an interview process where we ask a set number of questions. Usually they're pretty similar between all Enneagram teachers, that ask questions related to each of the 9 patterns. And it's fascinating, because I've done so many, about 2,500. There is a pattern in the way people answer. It's amazing. And so one of the personalities used, and I won't say, in case it might be Vicky's, but there's certain language that people use, and you look for that. So even it used to be an hour-long interview process we'd do, but now I can usually do it in just 10, 15 minutes just to make sure. So I'll ask you a couple of questions each, if you like.
Sure, definitely.
Make a guess. So Vicky, for you, how important is freedom to you?
It's important. Yeah.
How important? Like
1 to 10, you mean? Scale of 1 to 10?
And what it means.
See, you just did that. I felt that you just did that then. It's all data collection. So freedom for me, I would say, what I consider freedom, I need to feel free. I'd say it's up there. I'd say 8 or 9.
Yeah. And what's it like if you feel limited or trapped in some way?
Trapped, yeah. That's a word that's come up in my life a lot. Yeah. So it's suffocating, and I feel like a caged animal, and I will do whatever it takes to find another way. I make change. I like change, because that way I can manage my outcomes.
Yeah. And I imagine that you're very visionary. Maybe happy for other people to do maybe some more of the detailed things sometimes, but I bet you're very visionary and can synthesize information very quickly.
I think so, yeah.
And can see the big picture.
Yeah. And a big picture.
And care about fun.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And need to keep your mind stimulated and keep things being interested in variety.
You've got me. What's the number?
I'm nodding over here like, yep.
Because you work together, so you know. And again, it's an energy, so I'd look at the 7 developmental pathway, Vicky, and the superpower of the 7 is that they come into this world and they're a breath of fresh air. They're this spark of awe and joy. They see awe in the world. They love to travel. Do you love to travel?
Oh, yeah.
I love to travel. Love travel and love nature.
Yes.
Nature. Yes. And we could all say we love travel and love nature, but there is a certain way that 7s answer those questions. It feeds you. Yeah. And for the 7 person, it's don't box me in, don't limit me, don't just give me one choice. Life is a spectrum of possibilities, and I want a bit of this and a bit of that, and it's a wonderful energy. It's creative, it's bright, it's positive, it's optimistic.
Hey, thanks.
That's, I think, where you're sitting.
That's
exciting. So you can have a little read.
I will.
And then Laura, for you, And so one of the things, I think, Vicky, you probably lead with cognitive, well, if it's the 7 pathway, you lead with cognitive intelligence. So it's this capacity to be strategic and logical and rational. Vicky, I think you, Laura, sorry, I think you probably lead with your heart. And
Probably.
yeah, and so there's 3 different ways. So the core motivation for people, like, so for Vicky, it's security. But security looks like, don't box me in, keep the variety, keep the fun happening. I feel secure in that way. For you, Laura, I think it's more about connection. Connection's the core motivation. And it's whether it's connecting via being helpful and giving and serving, although you recognize that in your daughter, whether that's a pattern in you, or whether it's about achieving. And if I'm achieving and I feel really competent and I have got goals and I'm reaching the goals and I feel like I'm doing well in life and my relationships are important as well, it may be the 3 pathway.
Yeah, I was nodding to all of that.
Yeah. So it's just the questions to work out 2, 3, or 4. But the 4 pathway, and I got a little bit of a hit of that earlier with you, but authenticity is the big thing for the 4s, that we're all unique. And you said that about if the Enneagram was all over the world. So there's a difference, though, between 2, 3, and 4. So the 2 is usually very positive and forward moving. The 3 can be, when they're not so conscious, it's more rushing to the goals, getting things done, ticking off the things on the list. It feels so great. And the 4 is more about knowing that they're different and depth. I want deep conversations. Don't give me small talk. I want deep
all day
conversations. And I see beauty. I love beauty, whether it's a sunset. And so my mood can go up with that. And then my mood can go down depending.
Most definitely. I'm an artist. So yeah, absolutely. Everything is art, nature. Yep. Sunsets. Yes.
The 4 pathway is often referred to as the artist. Isn't that amazing? Or the romantic. The other thing that I love to say, your business partners, is that one of the, and not that, please know that it's not about any personality is better with any other one. Absolutely not. 2 good people with good hearts are together. But I so frequently see the 4 and 7 pattern, the 4 and 7 together. And it's a great combination in business or romantic relationships, any combination is. But what you have is the 7 usually is the point of lightness and fun and visionary and optimistic. And the 4 is the depth. Let's make this deeper. And so it's a lovely synergy.
Yeah, I think that we complement each other extremely well as business partners. Yeah, from day one, we recognized that we were very well matched. Best relationship I've ever been in.
That's great. And that's, of course, not to say, of course, Vicky, you can do depth, and of course, Laura, you can do fun and enjoyment. But that's it. It's knowing the developmental pathway and then becoming more of who you actually already are. So we've got all 9 in us. We're just overly doing one pathway. When we identify it, we become more flexible. And so the 7 can learn to sit a bit more in suffering, maybe, which is hard because pain is not fun. And the 4 can learn sometimes to be light and see so much meaning in mundane moments. So it's a growth path.
Yeah.
And what's the superpower of the 4, Tracy?
So the superpower of the 4 is that they can sit in people's suffering. So an end-of-life nurse or in a critical situation, the 4 can sit in that. They can hold space. I've got a fireplace in my agency. I often put my hand against the fireplace and just say the 4 can keep their hand there and they're okay with it. Most other personalities are keeping the hand out here. Who wants to get too close to that? But the 4 can do that because there's depth in that. There's meaning in that. So the 4 looks for depth and meaning in everything. So any conversation, and if there's not depth and meaning in something, they don't want to be there. So you can bring depth. So one of my closest dear friends has the 4 pattern. So I don't want to say R4 has the 4 pattern. And I can give her any of my work and she'll extract more depth from it. And I just say, that's amazing, So it's a superpower in terms of seeing beauty. But sometimes for the 4, it's about them seeing that in themselves, not just outside themselves.
I'll tell you, it's hard to network as a 4 because it's that superficial conversation thing of like the getting to know you.
Yes.
I don't like that. I don't enjoy that at all.
No, you don't. And Vicky would be probably comfortable with that and brilliant at that. So again, it's usually like the 7 personality is it's charming. It can move in the crowds. It has great stories, tells stories, and
Yep,
but good to
she's-
know that about yourself, Laura. That's
amazing.
a growth edge. But yeah, and but it's beautiful that you bring depth to all of us. You know, you both have a gift to the world, or joy and depth. How lovely.
Yeah. And I think that's why I've fallen in love with podcasting so much, because it is deep conversations, interesting conversations with interesting people like you. And I love it. Like this,
Right.
I could do this for the rest of my life and nothing else.
Yes.
And I'd be so happy.
Oh,
Shall we
absolutely.
do that, partner? I'm good with that.
Yeah, probably. I'm not stopping anytime soon.
No.
It's
Yeah.
great. Incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some question that we often ask podcast guests is about failure and failure mindset. Do you have a view on that?
It's an interesting question for me. So I have the 3 developmental pathway, and I've known that and worked with that for 17 years. I'm still a work in progress. So, you know, you teach what you need to learn. But the 3, if you read about the 3 personality, the 3 ego is all about present as competent, present as successful. It's all about presentation, chase the goals, and never fail. And so there's a great fear in the 3 personality about failure, like a really huge fear where they can go into a panic about it. It's been my work, and to define for myself what success means, I guess. And I think that's what helps me with failure, because I thought a bit about failure. And I think the best way for me to talk about it is in terms of what success would mean to me. And it's not, the word success resonates for a lot of 3s. It's never really resonated for me. It's always felt a bit superficial in some way. But I think for success for me would be at my funeral, if everybody spoke about me in a way that I had been in their life, I'd been present, I had made them feel good about themselves when I was around them, and that I had to self-regulate, and that I was, I guess, a loving force, and that was authentic. And so the growth path for the 3 is about being authentic. So in the hurry to the core belief is about never fail, hurry to the goal. And the core motivation is connection. So the core belief is if I'm successful, I'll connect. But of course, it doesn't work like that. You're so busy racing for the goal that you're not present to those that you love. You get impatient because they're not as efficient as you. So my work has been to slow that all right down, pace myself, which I do pretty well these days at 58. I have to, but I pace myself really well, I think. And I care deeply about becoming more conscious and being present. I'd like to see more of that in the world. And so the word failure doesn't resonate as much for me anymore. Failure for me, I suppose, is like yesterday morning when I could feel myself getting impatient in the traffic. And Michael Singer, can you handle it? So it's still always having to work with it. But the 3ness is still there in me, but what's important?
It's a great mindset. So any advice for people? I can only imagine the advice will be learn your Enneagram path and work with it. But, what is a person to do if they're in business and they feel like they're maybe on a slippery slope where things aren't going the way they'd planned, and they're looking to build a bit of resilience? And, what kind of thoughts might you share with someone in that situation if they were just looking to pick themselves back up and get back on track?
Yeah, that's a really wonderful question. It's a really important question. And I've had a couple of clients that have come to me, beautiful clients that have in their own mind failed in business and have wondered about how to get back on track and have just lost all confidence. And so with them, I had worked, because it's what I do, I had helped them work out which developmental pathway they had, which is working out, understanding why they had the struggles that they had. So in terms of making sense of that was really important, and maybe making sense of relationship with business partners or clients along the way, that was really helpful for them. And then I guess to understand that they do have a superpower and what that is, and how can they do the work coming up, whether it's staying in the same business or changing, in a way that really aligns with who they are. And who they are is not the developmental pathway. Who they are is just everything, the whole universe inside each of us. But, to bring it down, certainly all 9 pathways. And sometimes we need to take on the strength of an 8 and say, no, I don't like it, don't do that. That's kind of the 8 path. Or to be leaning in and generous like the 2. Or to make things light like the 7 can do. They're all 9 ways of being able to manage life. And so I think knowing that you actually have all those resources in you, and can you use more of those resources, and know what your superpower is, and know that your ego is probably giving you a really hard time. And can we have a bit of a chat to that? Like I still take mine out for coffee, my 3 ego that says, you're not writing your book fast enough. And I say, I just want to stare at the wall. I just want to do yoga. It's just that it's talking to it sometimes, and I just help people, I think, to do that. And it's very loving, and it's very compassionate, and helping them to be more self-compassionate. We all need more of that.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We're often so tough on ourselves, so hard on ourselves when we don't meet the expectations we set for ourselves, or something like a pandemic comes and throws everything out the window, and we have to shift and move and pivot and change. And we often just are the hardest on ourselves. And why aren't I successful yet? And why haven't I become a millionaire? I'm putting in all these hours yet. And, we have all these things that I think are very normal. But we could be a little bit more self-compassionate. I think the world would be a much nicer place. We'd all be a little happier, a little more relaxed, and perhaps get more done, not spinning in the negativity, right?
That's it. If there's more ease, it's not about the 3 way of efforting your way through. That's been the hard learning for me. Can I fall back in the arms of the angels? Can I let grace move through me? And if I'm efforting so hard, if all of us are efforting so hard, sometimes we just need to go for a swim or do something to let flow and let, I like to say, talk about God spiritually, but grace of God or grace move through us. Just give ourselves space for that, and to know it's our ego with its illusionary core beliefs that are driving a lot of what's happening. If you know that voice, there's a higher part of us that can talk back to that and maybe come up with some wisdom that's needed at the time. Yeah,
exactly. We should all listen. Come a little stiller, a little quieter.
Yes.
Listen to ourselves, learn more about ourselves and each other in our relationships, whether that be a business relationship or a personal relationship. I really appreciate you, especially you going into Vicky and I's. That was so awesome. It's really nice to learn a little bit more. I kind of knew everything. You were just like nailing it. I was like, that's Vicky, absolutely. So yeah, it really was fun. I really enjoyed having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for such a fabulous conversation. And we know that you're writing a book. So look out for a book from Tracy Baker Lawrence soon, and we will shout that out. Perhaps we'll have to have you back on again after you've launched it, and we'll have another conversation. How's that sound?
Thank you. That's lovely. I'd love that, Laura. Thank you. Yeah.
Hope so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. This has been
my
great.
Great pleasure. It's lovely. Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on Resilient Entrepreneurs, and please subscribe to this channel to be notified of each new episode. We love supporting entrepreneurs, especially with mindset, marketing, and motivation, which is why we feature entrepreneurs from all walks of life in various stages of business. We hope their stories will inspire and encourage you to keep doing what you do well with resilience. We've also created this space for an incredible community of business founders who meet weekly in our membership called the Level Up League. If you want to know more about it, look us up online at 241branding.com. See you next time.